Okay, welcome everybody to the Budget Committee. We have a busy agenda today. Before we go any further, I'm going to remind members of the public that anybody wishing to speak further regarding an issue on the 2016 Budget Committee agenda for today may appear before Council at its meeting on December 14th, 2015 at 7 o'clock p.m. when the recommendations from this meeting will go forward for final consideration. If you wish to speak as a delegation, please sign the sheet located at the back of the room or notify the Clerk's Department no later than noon the day of the Council meeting. Any PowerPoint presentations must also be forwarded to the Clerk's Department no later than noon the day of the meeting. I do have regrets from Councillor Alan Elgar, who's at the Niagara Escarpment Commission representing us there both today and tomorrow. And are there any others? I don't see anyone. Welcome to the other members of Council who are here today. Do I have any declarations of pecuniary interest? I see none. Very good. We have an important agenda today dealing with the overview of the 2016 operating budget and 2017 and 2018 forecasts, the 2016 rates and fees, shovel-ready projects, and the 2016 RBC Canadian Open. Just so I know, are there any members of the public here to speak to any of the items? I don't see any. Very good. We do have an overview of the operating budget by our staff. Welcome. And we look forward to the information.
Once it shows up on the slide here, we'll be on the screen, we'll be all set. Good morning. Today we are continuing our 2016 budget process with the operating budget. And before we started, I wanted to just remind everyone of the guideline that Council set for us, that the overall increase on this budget be prepared in line with inflation. The budget being presented today has been prepared in accordance with this guideline. My presentation today will provide an overview of the operating and capital budgets for 2016. As well, I will touch on the rates and fees that are included on today's agenda. And then there is the report on shovel-ready projects and the RBC. Commissioner presentations will take place tomorrow, after which time there'll be a bit of a break to allow you time to review all of the information that's being presented today. This year we have meetings set up for delegations on November the 30th and December the 2nd, and that allows our residents an opportunity to participate in the budget process. Budget deliberations are scheduled for December the 7th and our final approval on December the 14th. Council directed us to bring a budget in line with inflation. For budget purposes, we have used core inflation. The most recent Bank of Canada monetary policy that was released in October showed year-over-year core inflation at 2.1%. They are forecasting core inflation to remain in the 2% range throughout 2016. The budget being presented today comes in below core inflation at 1.68% for the overall increase. There are no service reductions in our recommended budget. The budget ensures that programs and services valued by our residents are maintained. It also incorporates the operating cost of completed capital projects and continues our past practice of ensuring sufficient funding for infrastructure renewal. This year, the proposed budget also includes service adjustments required to maintain service and meet increasing demand for service as the town grows. The budget continues to be prepared using performance-based program-based budgeting methodology, or PB2. The focus is on programs and services and the outcomes that are desired from those programs. Performance measures continue to be refined to increase the effectiveness in reporting of results. This year, as part of our 2016 budget, we've updated our measures to provide a better understanding of program outcomes and to assist residents and council in understanding the outcomes achieved over time. We show a 5-year trend for each of our measures. As a lower-tier municipality, the town is one portion of the overall tax bill, representing approximately 40%. The remaining 60% is levied on behalf of the region and province for education purposes. When the bill is combined, it presents the overall increase that residents will see on their tax bill, similar to a single-tier municipality. The budget presentation today focuses on that 40% share of the tax bill. There are 4 components that make up the recommended budget. The first is the cost to deliver the same level of service as currently exists. This is the base budget and includes inflationary increases on expenditures, revenue adjustments based on our proposed rates and fees for 2016, and volume adjustments required due to demand for service. Our second group of costs represents capital. It results from the capital budget. The capital budget was presented to Council in October, and during my presentation, I showed the impact that the capital budget will have on the operating budget over the next 10 years. In some years, this can be a very significant driver of costs in our operating budget. A good example of this will be in 2018 and 19 when we open our new fire station and the expanded Oakville Arena. Those costs will have to be incorporated in the operating budget. The capital impacts also include the cost of vehicles and equipment and transfers of reserves required for our capital budget. Our infrastructure levies are an important source of funding in our capital budget as they ensure that we maintain our infrastructure in a state of good repair. While integral to ensuring town facilities, roads, and infrastructure are maintained at the desired level, they do have a significant impact on our operating budget. Each year, we are required to report under Regulation 28409 the impact the budgeting for amortization or depreciation and post-employment liabilities would have on our budget. I have included that in the executive summary this year, and as it indicates, I am pleased to report that budgeting for amortization costs would not impact our operating budget. We are actually funding our infrastructure renewal at a higher level through our capital levy and our transfers to reserves. This is significant. As you'll see in a few minutes, the impact of this category on our budget. However, it ensures fiscal sustainability over the long term. The final component of the budget is the service adjustments. These have been identified by departments as necessary to meet the demand for programs and services. They're incorporated in the proposed budget for the committee's consideration, and there is also one new request for the committee's consideration. The budget has been prepared keeping in mind an increase in line with inflation. However, there are several enhancements that residents will see in 2016 as a result of the operating and capital budgets. The first one I've shown here is year 1 of our transit service plan. The service plan has been incorporated in the proposed budget and will provide significant increases in transit service for residents throughout 2016. As well, there's funding for additional resources to meet increased demand for recreation programs, and residents will begin to be able to self-check in and out books at our library branches with the implementation of RFID. RFID will also allow better inventory and materials handling for the library. There's funding included to enhance our after-hour call handling, as well as more frequent council newsletters. And finally, there's increased funding to support our infrastructure renewal requirements. We have assumed 1.92% of assessment growth in the proposed budget. This is based on the most recent information that we received from MPAC. The final roll won't be received until sometime in early December, and we are hoping that we will have that before the budget is approved. I did want to note, assessment growth results from new properties that have been added to the roll or where renovations or expansions to existing properties and is not the result of CBA. Our total base budget, operating budget increase is 1.16% net of increased assessment growth. This includes the inflationary impacts as well as the annualized impact of adjustments that were made in 2015 and our capital impacts on the operating budget. Our capital levies total 1.15% on the town budget, and this includes our capital levy as well as the additional funding for road resurfacing. And finally, 0.14% increase for service adjustments. This brings the town's increase to 2.45%. When we add in the region of Halton's proposed increase of 1.9%, the overall increase on the 2016 budget that residents will see is 1.68%. The gross expenditures in our proposed budget total $297.7 million. This is the cost of operating the town's programs and services. And this slide shows some of the impact by program. Our corporate revenue and expense program at $63 million, that includes all of our transfers to capital It includes funding for debt servicing costs, etc. Our emergency services at $34.8 million, followed by infrastructure maintenance, all the way down to the smaller programs. The net tax levy for 2016 is $172.3 million. This shows the tax levy funding by program, which of course is different than the gross expenditures, as many of our programs have user fees which offset the cost of delivering the program. Our largest program is emergency services at $34.5 million, followed by transit at $21.4 million and infrastructure maintenance at $21 million. Corporate support includes many of the back office functions such as finance, legal, HR, and programs such as that. Sorry. On the previous slides, I showed the spending by program. This just shows you where, on $100 of taxes paid, the residents' money goes. The largest component is infrastructure renewal at $23 out of every 100. It's followed by emergency services, our road network, transit, all the way down to culture. The tax levy increase resulting from the recommended budget is $7.2 million. 4 programs account for approximately $5 million of this increase. The largest increase is in infrastructure maintenance at $1.7 million. The increase is the result of new positions that were approved as part of the 2015 budget, as well as contract increases in winter control, leaf pickup, basin maintenance, and our one-call locate program. Budget also includes increased transfers to our equipment reserves to ensure that we have sufficient funding to replace vehicles and equipment over the long term. Oakville Transit accounts for $1.6 million of the increase. This increase reflects the first year of the transit service plan and includes new staff and vehicles required to deliver the service enhancements. Over the next 5 years, the transit plan is expected to increase the cost recovery in transit from the 28% expected in 2015 to 35%. Emergency services has the largest increase, is the third largest increase at $1 million, and this is primarily personnel costs, as well as increased transfers to our equipment reserves for the replacement of fire vehicles. And finally, the 4th largest program increase is in information systems and solutions at $700,000. This includes the increased staff required to support the new software and automation processes that have been implemented throughout the town, as well as the software maintenance costs. The balance of the increase is spread among the remaining programs, reflecting the impact of inflation and expanding service due to growth on our operating budget. This shows the breakdown of our gross expenditures by cost component. The largest component, of course, is personnel services and benefits at 47.9% of overall spending. This includes the new positions that were approved last year and have been annualized, as well as the new positions required because of completed capital projects, our transit service plan and service adjustments, and also an inflationary wage and benefit adjustments. Our purchase services comprise 11.4% of our budget and have increased $2.8 million due to inflationary pressures, as well as costs associated with winter control and software maintenance. The Municipal Act requires us to have a balanced budget. This shows the funding sources for the 2016 budget. Taxation will account for 57.9% of the overall funding for the budget. This is followed by fees and charges at 22.5%. I mentioned earlier that this year we've included service adjustments in our budget. These adjustments reflect the cost of accommodating increased demand for town services, as well as and also include funding for overnight parking permit requests and for an increase to our council newsletters. These have been included in the proposed budget and are reflected in the increase that I talked about earlier. There's also one new request, and that's for increased funding in our council services for business development. If this request is approved, it would increase the town budget to 2.48% and the overall increase to 1.69%. There is a chart identifying a budget committee referrals in the budget overview report on today's agenda. As well, the referrals are shown in Table 7 of the executive summary. Some of the items were considered as part of the capital budget meetings that were held in October. The remaining items here will be addressed as part of the budget process currently underway, with the exception of the report on bylaw options, which will be brought forward in early 2016. The overall impact of the proposed 2016 budget is 1.68%. The budget meets Council's guideline, is fiscally sustainable, and ensures our programs and services valued by residents are maintained. It also ensures sufficient funding to operate and maintain new infrastructure and provides the funding required to maintain our existing infrastructure. The budget document distributed today will also be posted on the town website. It includes an executive summary of the budget as well as detailed program budgets for each of the 26 town programs, and will include performance measures as well. The document also includes the recommended 2016 capital budget as revised by the committee on October the 26th. The 2017 and 2018 forecasts are presented for information to assist you in looking at the current projected tax increases over the next 2 years. The projections include inflationary increases, operating impacts from capital projects, but do not include any service enhancements. There will be challenges as we move forward in coming years as we incorporate the cost of operating the many facilities that are included in our capital forecast. As well, we'll have to look at the financial impact of our stormwater master plan and our planning revenues and development revenues that fluctuate depending on the economy and development. This chart shows the components that make up the increase in the budgets. In 2017 and 2018, we have assumed 1% of assessment growth. The largest driver of the increase in both years is inflationary impacts. This is followed by the operating impact from capital, which is 0.94% right now for 2017, and increases to 1.63% in 2018 as a result of the opening of the new fire station. The town increase at this time forecasted for 2017 is 3.73%, and for 2018 it's currently sitting at 4.66%. With the region of Halton's forecasted increases, it brings the overall increase at this time to be forecast at 2.31% for 2017 and 2.72% for 2018. The capital budget was presented to the committee in October. As the committee will be deliberating on both the capital and the operating budget, and there were some minor revisions to the capital forecast during the October meetings, I thought it'd be worthwhile to bring forward a few slides on the 2016 capital budget. The committee made 2 changes to the proposed 2016 budget. One was the deferral of the Bronte Library branch pending studies that will be completed in 2016, and additional funding to include a Lawrence Scott Memorial. These have been included in the revised budget as shown. As you can see from this chart, 42% of the 2016 capital budget is for infrastructure renewal. Growth and strategic priorities each make up 27% of the budget. Our growth projects include new road projects, buses, equipment, as well as parks in our growth areas. Our strategic priorities include funding towards the hospital demolition of the old hospital site, our EAB program, as well as the streetlight conversion, LED conversion, and our Fire Station 3 relocation. Our community enhancements include items like the waterfront trail improvements and onboard cameras in transit. The largest program spending in the 2016 budget is infrastructure planning, and that's because, of course, that delivers all of our road improvements throughout the town. This is followed by our parks and open space at 21% of total funding. The largest source of funding in our 2016 capital budget is the capital levy at 26% of total funding. This is followed by development charges at 22% of total funding, and that's used, of course, for our growth projects, and our capital reserves account for 19% of funding. Many of the largest projects in our 2016 capital budget are road related. However, there is also funding for the LED street lighting conversion phase 1 towards the demolition of the hospital and replacement of vehicles and equipment. We are projecting our reserves and reserve fund balances to total $186.5 million at the end of 2016. This includes the transfers to and from reserves that are included in the proposed budgets. Our development charge reserve collections are based on forecasted revenue projections, assuming development growth throughout the town in 2016. Our stabilization reserves at $52.1 million account for 21% of owned revenues. Best practice indicates that stabilization reserves be held at a minimum of 2 months or 17% of own source revenues. This is to protect the municipality against unforeseen events. We're at 21%, which puts us in a good place should unforeseen events arise. During my presentation on the capital budget and forecast, I included a slide that showed our debt principal over the 10-year period. This shows the 2016 projected outstanding debt at $129.5 million. There were several requests for information as part of our capital budget meetings. The report on shovel-ready projects is included on the agenda today. On tomorrow's agenda, there is a report with the additional information that was requested by the committee, as well as a report on security cameras for our BIAs and a timing of the South Central Community Centre. In previous years, we have sent out electronically a form that Council can use to request any information or recommendations to our Budget Committee. We will be sending this form out this morning and ask that it comes back by December 1st. This will allow us time to include it in the budget deliberation meeting on December the 7th. Also included on today's agenda are our proposed 2016 rates and fees. Each year, as part of our annual budget process, our rates and fees are reviewed by departments to ensure they reflect the cost of delivering service in accordance with our rates and fee policy. The fees have been posted on the town website since November 6 to allow the public and stakeholders time to review them. As well, notice of today's meeting was placed in the Oakville Beaver. While most of the fees increases will take effect on January the 1st, some, such as our recreation program increases, will take place later in the year. Our user fee policy ensures consistency, transparency, and accountability across the corporation in how our fees are set. Most town programs are subsidized to a large extent by the tax levy. The policy for user fees for programs and services that are a direct benefit to the user, such as a building permit or a personal trainer, will either fully be covered by user fees or a high portion of the cost of delivering that service will be covered by fees. Whereas services that are a benefit to the community, such as fire or parks and trails, would have either a high proponent of tax levy support and very small proponent of user fee, or they would be fully funded from the tax levy. In accordance with Council's direction as part of our 2015 budget, we're presenting the fees today, but final decision on the fees will take place at the deliberation meeting on December the 7th. The fees have been reviewed to ensure cost recovery ratios are maintained and we're not putting an increased burden on the tax levy. Staff are very cognizant of affordability of town programs, and a great deal of care is taken in setting the fees. Most of the fee increases are inflationary and have been incorporated in our proposed budget. They represent an increase in revenue of $957,000. Our planning and development fees have been revised based on the work undertaken this past year to ensure they reflect the cost of delivering the service. A report was included on our administrative services agenda last week underlying the methodology. And Jane Closey will speak about our development fees during her presentation tomorrow. As well, the licensing fees that are presented in the rates and fee schedule reflect Council's approved fees from this week. There is one change, however, that I did want to note. In emergency services, on page 42 of your agenda, the vehicle accident MTO rate, we have now been advised by MTO that that fee is increasing to $450. It shows as $410 in the book. We will be revising the schedule accordingly. The budget documents have been distributed today and will be posted on the website. An electronic version will be sent to councillors this morning, bookmarked to make it easier to read. We have scheduled our commissioner presentations for tomorrow to provide further information on the various programs that I've highlighted this morning. There's a break in the schedule to provide time to review this information, followed by 2 meetings for delegations to give residents and stakeholders an opportunity to participate in the process. Deliberations are scheduled for December 7th for both our capital and operating budgets, and final approval on December the 14th. There are many ways for the public to take part in our budget process. A number of steps have already been taken to inform residents of the process. The budget will be on our website as well. These meetings have been advertised. As well, we have copies of an executive summary here that's available for residents should they wish to have it. And their budget email is again set up so that residents can provide input to us. 2 budget open houses have been scheduled to provide an informal setting for residents to provide input or ask questions regarding the budget. And all meetings will be televised on Town TV. And that concludes my overview of the 2016 operating and capital budgets.
Thank you very much for that overview. Members of committee or council who are here, are there any questions at this time regarding any of the items that are on the agenda? Mayor Burton?
I have no questions today, but once I've had a chance to read it, I expect to have a few.
Very good, and that is the intent of tomorrow. So we'll be going through some of the details tomorrow, of course, and for anybody who's got any questions, we will be having open houses and delegation days, so we look forward to public information in those forums. Are there any questions over here? Councillor O'Meara?
Sorry, and just for protocol's sake, is this the opportunity to ask a question on something in the rates and fees, or is that tomorrow?
Absolutely, you can ask questions today.
One thing I noticed is that there's still fees for the bed and breakfast inspection, and it was my understanding that at ASC we had that removed, so I'm just wondering if I can get some clarification on whether that should be removed or that should still be in there. On page 40 in the rates and fees.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the rates and fees under our licensing were removed. I believe these fees are related to emergency services, and I'm not sure if someone from fire could speak to these fees or not.
No, I think he's speaking to the licensing bylaw issue of bed and breakfast inspections, which are on page 40 of the agenda as opposed to the appendix, I think is what you're
So I
referring to,
actually,
right?
Ms. Sully is correct. It is under the fire prevention and services on page 40 of the rates and fees in item number 2. But I just thought that would be encompassed in I don't believe that's going to be happening anymore. I'm just would hope for some clarification on that.
I believe it becomes irrelevant because the requirement is no longer there.
Okay.
But I think our staff can clarify that.
It's a new fee.
This, of course, was prepared prior
This is
to
a new fee that fire's put in.
that decision.
Yeah, this is the fire inspection.
Yeah.
That's separate from the licensing.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, we'll have to report back on this, but this is a separate fee from the licensing fee, and it relates to fire inspections. We'll have to get clarification from the fire department on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so in terms of the licensing fees, though, that particular one becomes irrelevant. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor O'Meara, are you satisfied? I'm satisfied. Great, okay. Any other questions? I did note one member of the public that arrived today. Are you interested in providing any information today? You're happy? Okay. Councillor, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, there's some big variances as you go down the licensing fees. For instance, page 26, you go from transfer from owner to spouse from 1,077 to 376. What's the justification for, like, there's several ones where it was several thousand going down to several hundred, and I just wondered what the justification was for that. Or is that something that we already covered off in the It would be on page 26 of our agenda.
Councillor Dudek is referring to some of the taxi industry licensing fees where we've reviewed the fees and dropped the charges substantially.
I can address that more in my remarks tomorrow when I make the presentation, but just very briefly, it was a comprehensive fee review that we undertook, and the results were, in some cases, quite dramatic.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor O'Meara?
Sorry, I guess just, well, I'm on sort of a bigger level of things that I'm trying to get my head around. In one of the main issues in the report on page 14, it says, you know, it's about the cost recovery and full cost recovery. And one of the last sentences in the last paragraph before considerations, it says the committee may increase fees to improve cost recovery of fee-supported programs where full cost recovery has not been achieved if desired. And then the rates and fees schedule would be amended accordingly. One issue I am having difficulties wrapping my head around when I'm reading the rates and fees. You know, you said that the rate of inflation is 2.1%. So therefore, anything in the rates and fees over 2.1% is an attempt to get closer to full cost recovery in programs. I have no clue what the end goal for full recovery is on any of these items in here that are over 2.1%. So it's tough for me to determine what we should or should not go for full cost recovery in one blow or not. It seems like it's death by 1,000 cuts where we're getting somewhere that I have no clue what the end goal is on any of these programs. At what point are we trying to aim to have full cost recovery on any of our programs or all of our programs? Which ones are we trying to get incrementally, or which ones are we, you know, for youth, for soccer rentals is less than adult soccer rentals, but it's still a field. So we've obviously decided somewhere that we're going to take that blow slower, but it's hard for me to make a decision based on whether to proceed with full cost recovery when I have no clue what those numbers are, or how to get to those numbers. I read that we've decided to start renting soccer spaces per hour, and one of the things that was in the report, it says that you know, over a 1 hour minimum, rates have been increased slightly in order to compensate for the loss of potential revenue from only 1 hour bookings. So now we're asking people we've switched to 1 hour, so now they're subsidizing other 1 hour spaces that may or not be full. So I'm trying to wrap my head around the overall goal here of what we're trying to achieve in terms of full cost recovery. And I'm wondering if we might be able to see some numbers that we can either say, okay, I see where we're going here, in 2 years we'll be there, or we may never get there, but we keep adding 4% a year or 2% above inflation. I mean, I'd like some sort of measure that we can tell the public, this is what you should expect, and this is where we're going, and this is what full cost recovery is. It just seems it comes to me in pieces, and I have no clue whether a 9% increase is getting us that much closer to full cost recovery or whether it's a drop in a bucket. And it's hard for me to gauge whether these rates and increases are appropriate without that information. So I'm wondering if that would be something that staff might be able to give to us.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we could look at providing that. The fees, the recovery varies depending on the program. So in our building planning development, full cost recovery. We want full cost recovery there. In the case of the user fees for our parks, Chris Mark actually met with the user groups to explain. Several years ago, there was a report that went to council on the parks fees, and it showed that we're well below where we would desire to be. Where we desire to be would never be full cost recovery in any event. So gradually, they've been trying to increase the fees. Every year we pick some programs, we update them. Part of our policy is that within every 4-year period you go through and you make sure you're still achieving your full cost recovery. That work is ongoing. In Chris's case with the sports fields, he met with the groups and explained it. We did a market comparison and we're well below other market charges in other municipalities. So they do vary. We could put together a table for you to help explain why some of the fees are changing so much.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just jump in for a moment. Certainly, Council, over the years, there have been obviously a number of reports that have gone through Council which have talked about where we're trying to go in specific. So to give you just a simple answer standing here would be very difficult. But what I would be pleased to do on behalf of staff for the committee is to come forward perhaps at the, not tomorrow obviously, but the next committee meeting. We'd bring forward a report that would look at the categories of rates that we have, some of the philosophy there, so that you can get that good feel for it. And I think that's a good opportunity to bring that forward, and I'd be pleased to do that.
Mr. Green, council has an approved policy regarding cost recovery.
That's right.
And I think particularly for new members of council, I think it would be helpful for them to understand where council has landed on
And
this
that's
particular
certainly what
issue.
we would look at incorporating in that one report so that you can see it from a policy perspective and where we are going from a philosophical as well.
And we have dealt with it a number of times, and we have updated and reviewed that. And it did go through a very considered public process around the different types of programs that we have and what level of cost recovery we deem appropriate for the different kinds of things. As Nancy Sully was speaking about, for example, we don't charge for trail use at all, but there are other things that we charge a higher fee for. So there is a staggered cost recovery approach that the town has been using. Mayor Burton. Any others? Are you satisfied, Councillor Mayor?
And just one follow-up to that then, if we can. I'm, and again, a little wet behind the ears here, so trying to figure this out. If we are shifting the line item from user fees and we increase those fees, is there an expectation that that money would come out of the overall tax levy then? So we would see that shift, or is that something that wouldn't happen?
Maybe I will.
I guess the answer is yes, you do see a shift, and if you look at our budgets over the years, you have seen a shift damping down the tax levy requirements, and the funding is therefore coming out of rates and fees as a result. I'm not sure if our staff have anything more to add to that. But
That's correct.
okay. Mayor Burton?
I think you covered it.
Okay. Councillor O'Meara, are you satisfied at this point? Okay. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Okay, very good. Members of committee, then, we have 4 discussion items before us. The first is simply to receive the overview presentation from the Deputy Treasurer on the 2016 operating budget and the 2017-2018 forecast. Could I have a mover to receive the presentation? Thank you, Councillor Dudek. All those in favor? That's carried. Second item is the 2016 rates and fees, and the recommendation before us is that the rates and fees established in the rates and fees schedule attached as Appendix A to the November 18th, 2015 report from the Finance Department be approved for implementation on January 1st, 2016 and incorporated into the 2016 operating budget. 2, that the bylaw 2015-109, a bylaw to amend bylaw 2015-001 to provide for the establishment of fees to be charged in the processing of applications made in respect of planning matters subject to supplemental notes be approved. 3, that bylaw 2015-113, a bylaw to amend bylaw 2009-032, a bylaw to permit the recovery of costs incurred by the Oakville Fire Department, be amended by deleting Schedule A and replacing it with Schedule A as attached. And 4, that amendments to existing bylaws containing fees be presented directly to Council for approval as required. Members of committee, could I have a mover of that? Thank you, Councillor Knoll. All those in favor? That is carried. Item number 3 is the shovel-ready projects. The recommendation by staff is that the report dated November 2nd, 2015 from the Finance Department and the Engineering and Construction Department on shovel-ready projects be received. In some discussions that I've had, it's been noted that we may wish to direct staff to remove DC projects from the shovel-ready list. Councillor Dudek?
I'd be pleased to move that with that amendment or provision in there.
Thank you, Councillor Dudek. Any others? Then all those in favor? That's carried. Item number 4 is the 2016 RBC Canadian Open. That the cost for the 2016 RBC Canadian Open, as outlined in the report dated November 6, 2015, from the Economic Development Department and the Roads and Works Operations Department be funded from the Tax Stabilization Reserve. Are there any questions at this? Could I have a mover of that recommendation, please? Councillor Knoll. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your diligence on this. I look forward to the discussion that I'm sure we'll have tomorrow on from our staff and from members of the committee, council, and members of the public who wish to provide information. There are a number of open houses that we are scheduling, as well as the formal delegation days. And should you have any questions or comments for us, we look forward to hearing from you either by email or voicemail or any other way you wish to contact us. Thank you, everybody, and we're adjourned.